Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. I am Alex Hurtado, Director of PMM here at Anvilogic, and the host of our Dispatch podcast, dropping bi weekly on Spotify, YouTube, and as of this past week, Apple Music. But today, I'm going to be hosting this session on not just what's the latest and greatest with the Tines and Anvilogic integration, but we'll be able to see what it looks like and what it feels like. Because when we think about the SOC, it doesn't feel like a whole lot of freedom right now, right? It feels like firefighting, the fire being hundreds, if not thousands, of very low context alerts. And we're all, trying to automate, right? Everyone's hyped up and drunk on AI and want to tap into their AI projects, some forced into it. But if we don't trust what's really flowing through the detection pipeline into the AI automation of it all, it's just not very good use of our very precious analyst time, right? We got to fix the fundamentals. In fact, 42%, hot off the press, 42% of companies have abandoned most of their AI projects in 2025 with the rise of alert fatigue. So we really got to go back and fix these fundamentals. So if you are joining us and you're evaluating an auto alert triage solution or your next SIM replacement, or maybe trying to build a SIM in house, you're going to want to stay for the rest of this webinar. And so today's session is going to be all about how Anvilogic and Tines have kind of worked together the tech stacks here to come up with really three things. Having more trust in your detections, right, with Anvilogic's modular approach to behavioral depth. And that directly feeds into Tines' very also modular automation workflow engine that really closes that loop from signal to action faster, right? All in minutes time, and all without any kind of vendor lock-in, right? Of any kind, no vendor lock-in implication. So to show you exactly what that looks like, I am joined by Matt Mueller, calling in from New York City, field CISO at Tines and former leader at Coinbase. Thank you for joining us, Matt. And Michael Monty, his friends here at Anvilogic call him Monty, calling in from Westchester, head of security field engineering at Anvilogic, formerly JPMC. And fun fact, we also named our co-pilot after Monty. So we're literally going to have Monty showing and telling us his AI twin, who practically isn't a clone of himself in our customers' words. So thank you both so much for joining us. I'm calling in from Chicago, but not feeling any kind of FOMO from here because it's beautiful and sunny and 75 today. How are you guys doing?
Doing wonderful, and honestly wishing I had your weather. It's a little gloomy here on the East Coast right now, and then I think supposed to be 100 degrees next week. So yeah,
Oh my God.
we're getting all the weather over the course of about a week here.
Did the
I'm with you,
flood
Matt.
did the
It's
floods
all
ever make it
about
over there?
What's that?
Did the floods ever make it over there to the East Coast?
Fortunately, no. I think a little bit inland. I think some of them did for sure, but
yeah,
here at least in New York City, we're just drizzly.
Awesome.
drizzly. Drizzly's the word. I think in the past 3 days it's been drizzly. So
Yeah.
looking forward to at least some sun and some 100 degrees as well that goes with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Monty, I know we're coming right out of Father's Day. I think this was your first Father's Day.
Yeah, it was my second. I
Oh,
just snuck the
second.
last one in just right before Father's Day, so I got lucked out with two. But thank you.
Awesome. And so no sub one incidents from the baby this
No, I lucked out. Usually it's either the Friday before Fourth of July or Father's Day that gives me the challenges with some ones.
kid's not breaching the home perimeter is always a good sign.
Right, right.
Exactly.
So, gentlemen, before we, I guess, dive into detections and workflow automations, let's kick off with your background relevancy into the content that we're going to cover today. How did you both make it into security, and what are you most excited to cover today for our joint community here?
Yeah, I mean, my background has really always been blue team, and have built out both security programs as well as security operations teams in a number of different roles. Most recently at Coinbase, where I was the head of security operations, covering incident response, threat intelligence, threat detection, insider threat, all the really fun parts of security, right? And
Hmm.
helped scale that from a startup team of 3 people, including myself, to a global sort of follow the sun organization. And so, we definitely managed to bump into a lot of rough edges along the way, scaling that program. And as a result, I'm pretty passionate now about, helping to build the discipline of, detection and response, and, just sort of evolving what it means to be a security operations practitioner. Right? I think this is potentially one of the most exciting possible fields you can be in, defending against real adversaries. Or it can be one of the most soul-crushing fields you can be in, just responding to, nothing but garbage alerts day in, day out, right? And how we help teams make that difference, to me, is just such a fascinating and fun topic. I'm just really excited to talk about, what the state of the art looks like today.
I gotta agree. SIEM and SOAR is really the fun spot. You will never catch me on the identity or data protection side. Monty, tell us about you.
Yeah, so very similar to Matt, I've been always blue team. Started out of college as a triage analyst working at a large bank. Um, Really at that bank kind of grew into learning about triage, detection, and response. Developing detection engineering, and running that team, and then specifically growing into the global cloud stock manager. So we had a lot of people, but not the sort of technologies and infrastructures at the time. So from 2014 onward, while I've been there, it was how do we sort of solve this problem at scale and sort of work together as a team in order to sort of grow and innovate as we continue to kind of learn more about this or industry, as well as how to detect adversaries, right? Throughout the whole process of doing that, the main metric that our CISO would always be asking is mean time to detect and respond, right? How do we actually shorten our time to detect threats as well as respond to them? So that's why I'm super excited for this conversation today. And part of the reason that I joined Anvilogic, right, is to sort of help in solving some of those problems at scale, and also work with significant partners like Tines in order to sort of solve the response side of things as we continue to grow. And sort of solve some of these problems, leveraging some AI capabilities, but also doing it in a way that we provide structure and significant value of context prior to actually sending things to something to analyze.
I love that. And I do have to brag that something I really love, deeply love about the Tines and the Anvilogic brand is how deeply rooted in like practitioner DNA we have. Monty brought almost most of his team over. I feel like his team would follow him anywhere that he goes, and they just really understand, having lived through those trenches, and same with Tines. It seems like you guys' user base just truly loves the product the same way that like folks who shop at Trader Joe's, they love their Trader Joe. That's, you have like a similar effect, and that's a truly rare thing to find. So I really want to, and all with all of the walks that you've had in your journeys, I can't imagine all of the things you've come across, right? How rough around the edges it can be, as you said. So why don't you guys share your point of view, right? The some of the pain, some of those challenges behind what this integration can solve, right? What would you say are the biggest pain points that security teams are facing around alert fatigue and detection today?
Yeah, I mean, can't believe we only have, I can't believe we don't have like 6 hours to answer this
To
question,
cover
right?
Exactly. I was about
Because,
to say the same thing.
I think alert fatigue has been around as a concept for so long that it almost feels like we're probably starting to develop like alert fatigue, right? Where
Yeah.
we
Hmm.
almost take it for granted that everybody should have a million low fidelity informational alerts they just never get to, right? That's just status quo, and we just live like that. We sort of expect that when an incident does kick off, we're going to be scrambling to figure out like the right command to run an AWS to isolate a server, right? And remember what we did last time. And because, sure, we have playbooks, but when is the last time we updated our playbook, right? We're working off of documentation that was last updated 18 months ago before we did an M&A, right? Or before we adopted a new cloud provider. The world is moving to a SaaS environment, and SaaS doesn't necessarily lend itself to traditional detection and response tooling and telemetry, right? So the world is pretty rapidly changing around us, and I think the historical techniques around like developing a run book for human operation for every single activity just doesn't scale. And so on the response side, where I think we're seeing teams that just don't have the capacity to respond as fast as attackers who are ironically able to automate in their systems faster than the defenders, right? It's a pretty wild place to be.
Yeah, I completely agree on even on the detect side, right? So you kind of touched on SaaS ever so growing, right? Business expansion is huge. Mergers and acquisitions happen. There's a bottleneck, right, of detection development, constantly developing detections as a result of producing low fidelity alerts, right? Never actually going back to kind of fine tune and sort of revamp detections. I always had an issue where we had a point in time detection that was high fidelity, and high fidelity is another word that I'm starting to get fatigued about too. Um, but that point in time, your environment, your landscape, you're introducing new applications, you're introducing new infrastructure, you're introducing new SaaS environments. All of that kind of comes into play, and something that was a detection that was deployed at a point in time that may have been high fidelity is no longer high fidelity, right? And your sort of backlog of keeping up with that landscape and the growth of the business, in addition to sort of having to maintain those detections, result in that alert fatigue. And being able to kind of solve for that problem, not only for the sort of maintaining of those low fidelity alerts, or sort of looking at those not via humans, but through automation and process, can actually identify things that maybe are high fidelity from those low fidelity bunch of needle in a haystack rules that you have. So that's sort of some of the problems. I think the other is not sort of abiding by a detection framework, right? And what I mean by that is, are you delivering enough context for something to be actually valuable to triage, right?
Mm.
Are you just kind of giving enough information that you have to sort of somewhat take a long time to disseminate, what actually is happening, right? So there's a lot of things that are in play here. And again, I could probably talk about this for 6 hours if I could, about a lot of the different issues and principles that should be done in order to kind of detect things faster as well as respond to them.
Yeah, context is so king. It almost feels like we're playing defense in a game that's like constantly adding new rules. We were talking about games earlier, but we're still using an old playbook, right? This image of outdated playbooks and gathering dust while the business is outpacing detection is so real. It's something we see every day, but it's not just a tooling issue. It's also like a mindset and a maintenance problem as well. And also, some people think maybe jumping too quickly into AI is the problem, or starting too big, or leading with the hype. But it's I think it's really about skipping that trust piece, the alignment, that solid foundation. I really think that's something that's both of our solutions really are really phenomenal at. That you mentioned a little bit about the blind spots. What would you say are some of the biggest blind spots that teams run into?
I
Yeah.
can take this one. So, I mean, in terms of blind spots, visibility, right? Do you have enough visibility, or do you have the enough asset and enrichment information to contextualize that, right? A lot of those proponents, right, is you kind of lead into, performing AI in order to disseminate, whether an alert is malicious or benign. What are sort of what information are you giving it, right? And that sort of has to happen further upstream in order to provide value when you are doing some sort of triage analysis further downstream,
Hmm.
right? Do you have enough information for it to basically provide you value in terms of what you're responding to, right? Or what the detection is, or the alert is for that matter. So that's one of the components, I think.
So the visibility around like the availability of the data to make the detection, or what you were talking about earlier is the alert you have even providing you all the context you need.
Yeah, a little bit of both, right?
Both. Hmm.
Yeah, I think it's both, right? In the sense that, do you have the availability of data to actually be able to, detect the threat? Um,
Hmm.
are your logs verbose enough in order for us to receive that? So there is some sort of data element to it, but also, can you, with your detection, enrich that particular event with additional information so that enough context is there for a true sort of response, to come in, a true sort of response, to be accurate, I guess, against that particular event that you're looking at.
Hmm. What about you, Matt, on the automation front, I hear all the time like the team has growing number of tools, none of them talk to each other. What are the biggest blind spots you see for your customers, your prospects, start thinking about starting their SOAR projects?
Yeah, I think a big blind spot, honestly, is the fact that human process is
Hmm.
often decoupled from the technological signals that we get in our logs. And so,
Mm.
a real classic example of this is nobody's allowed to do anything in production by hand, except this small group of engineers, and they can only do those actions if they are, in a Jira ticket and approved to go run, right? And so you might have some detection logic that picks up a risky activity, right? Somebody's manually doing something in production, but that is totally decoupled from like finding out whether or not the human doing that like is authorized to do it, right? And if the actions that they're doing are aligned with what is in that ticket, right? And so,
Mm.
for a security analyst who's triaging, that alert or that or responding there, they might have to reach out in Slack to the human beings whose account is being used to perform this activity, wait to hear their response, wait for them to send a link to the ticket, right? Like all of this stuff. And honestly, 99.9% of the time, this is totally legitimate authorized activity that's occurring there, right? But the process of like building all of that context to determine that this is ultimately a false positive, right?
Hmm.
Is pretty painful for folks, and can definitely lead to just a whole bunch of fatigue there.
Hmm. I love that. So we laid out the challenges from both the detection and the response with the blind spots, the problems, right? That really cues up what a smarter, faster solution could look like, right? By way of this integration. And so again, and before we queue up the demo, I do want to talk about a little bit the signal, I guess, versus noise. You mentioned you started talking about this as well, but really when it comes to the detection quality, right? Because it really starts potential well in this webinar with Anvilogic potentially first, right? Creating those detection signals to then feed into Tines, right? To stitch together additional sorts of response workflows and playbooks necessary to actually respond to the alert at hand. So, Monty, on the detection front, right? While everyone's racing to automate, can you tell us a little? I know you hate the word high fidelity, but but what does Anvilogic do so differently, right?
Yeah.
That can help analysts build a good signal to send to Tines
Yeah.
specifically. Hmm.
And I'm starting to rephrase high fidelity to alert quality, and
Uh-huh.
I'll tell you why. Right? I think
Why?
it has to do with how we take unstructured. Theoretically, at the end of the day, what you're doing for as a data analyst or a detection engineer is you're taking unstructured data, you're finding an anomaly, and you're making structured data out of it to deliver something of value to your further downstream systems such as Times. Right? So
Yeah.
one of the huge components that Anvilogic provides is not only the ability to schematize and normalize your data as a part of, your detection, keeping that sort of bound, right, and making sure that all of your detections follow the same format in a detection framework, right?
Mhm.
In that detection framework, providing enough context as well from a MITRE perspective, in order to sort of drive, some threat intel related things as well, in terms of what threat groups are tied to that particular alert as well. Concatenating all of that information prior to delivering that over to a triage analyst or some sort of triage analyzer that can further determine and disseminate what's actually going on. The other thing that Analogic is really good at is the correlation aspect, right? There are a lot of signals, right? As sort of Matt mentioned, there are a lot of low fidelity signals that you can develop, right? I
Mhm.
think detection engineers, from a perspective of what they're delivering, right? There's a demand, there's a large demand to keep up with your business, right? In terms of we have a new application. Are we monitoring it? Or we have a new SaaS environment that we've deployed. Are we monitoring it? Right. So a lot of that backlog conversation that you have results in those low fidelity detections. But with Analogic, their ability to correlate sequentially in terms of initial access execution, command and control. Common example of that would be phishing, right? Somebody gets a phishing email, there's execution that's identified via EDR, and there's command and control happening after that. Correlating that activity together before you're delivering an alert. Again, that's more context and more structured context in terms of actually what's going on, so that your mean time to respond can be faster, right? Because you have a better understanding of actually what's happening throughout the process. So that's a lot of like about what I think about. I use this quote all the time, and I think it's said for a long time. That is, defenders think in graphs, so attackers think in graphs, defenders think in lists. Right? A lot of the sort of correlation-based detection that people are creating are looking at a tactic and technique, but sort of adversaries are thinking about how are they moving through the kill chain, or how are they moving through the MITRE tactics and techniques in order to compromise your organization. And they're
Mhm.
thinking about the different paths that they can take, right? So correlation rules, maybe thinking about one thing versus the other, but the ability to kind of use Anvilogic to kind of map that through, and sort of identify the different ways that a TTP or a threat actor can actually get into your organization and detect on that with as much structured information as well as much context as possible is something that we strive to do with our customers.
And Matt, follow-up question for you, with the context that Monty talked about, right? Sending a better signal, not high fidelity, in other words, as better signal to Tines, right? Why is this pairing so critical now for the modern SOC, right? Why now?
Yeah, if you look at, some of the like the data breach reports that come out, attacker dwell time is going down.
Mhm.
And at first glance, that sounds like a good thing until you actually start to parse out the data. And what you actually see is that attackers are getting discovered because they have deployed ransomware, right? Like that's not a great reason for attacker dwell time to be going down. It means that they succeeded in their objective.
Right.
And
You're too
so
late at that point.
yeah, exactly, right? Like we found the adversary because all of our laptops no longer work. And what that means is, because attackers, especially in today's ransomware landscape, are moving faster and faster to deploy their tooling and achieve their objective, it
Hmm.
means that defenders correspondingly need tools to move faster as well. And when I look at, sort of maybe a legacy sim, right? And the fact that I can't necessarily trust every single alert coming out of it, it does mean that I need a human to go validate all of those things before I can take action on them. When you start to get the high quality detections and the contextual information, and the better signal that Anvilogic provides, now I feel more comfortable as a security operations leader saying, okay, in some circumstances, we might actually lock a laptop before a human even gets the alert, right? We can
Hmm.
actually start flipping some of this paradigm on its head potentially, right? And say like the cost of ransomware is actually higher than the cost of 20 minutes of missed productivity for somebody in the accounting organization, because we want to make sure that we're able to respond rapidly in those scenarios. So I think what it does, it is unlocks creative ways to respond faster. And of course, with Tines, the fact that we have both deterministic workflow automation as well as AI tooling means that you can be confident that the response action is going to occur the same way you want it to occur every single time, right? You don't have to limit pushing that button to just your senior analysts that you're comfortable doing incident response with. You can now expose more of those capabilities to junior analysts, knowing that they have guardrails that are built in for them. So to me, it just feels like a really good combination of being able to say we have more scenarios we're confident taking action in, and we're now able to respond to those faster. And that's kind of the beauty of the two things working together.
Let this be your sign, y'all, to migrate off that old legacy sim already and start to pair a real nice integration that, or almost like a best of breed stack that lets you have trust in your detections, but also a nice signal down to your response. And Velogic doesn't physically, do any actual response actions, right? Our safe space is in the detection side and the correlating of signals. Of course, the proof is really in the real world examples. So, can you guys give us a scenario, a customer story where this really comes to life, where a detection from Anvilogic triggers maybe an automated workflow in Tines?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think on our side, right, we have several customers that are hooked up with Tines. It's funny how the cross collaboration is there, but we have a lot of organizations that use this against some of their actual lower fidelity alerts, right? And in that scenario, those low fidelity alerts are then sort of rather than sort of look at they're sort of examining their false positive rates of their alerts, right? They're identifying which ones are low fidelity and letting the triage analyzer workflow sort
Mhm.
of bubble up the ones that are something that need to be looked at, right?
Mhm.
So in a scenario of this case, right, we have a customer that is leveraging this workflow in order to create cases in Tines, and through
Mhm.
this process, some sort of low fidelity alert that they had actually did identify to be something that they should have been looked at, and was sort of something that was a security event in nature. So, being able to sort of save people time, right, and actually have people look at the things that are important, right? It's not sort of the process of automating the triage side of things. There's always going to be a human element to that component of it, right? I think it's important for people to look at alerts. I think it's important for people to kind of check what AI is actually doing. But in order to sort of handle the low fidelity problem and the alert fatigue problem, they sort of implemented this triage workflow in an effort to sort of use AI in order to provide a summary around what's actually happening with these alerts and reviewing those, right, and sort of disseminating which ones are security events, right? And throughout this process, they've saved a lot of time in order to respond to alerts because their queue is a lot smaller. But as a result of that, they're still sort of bubbling up the things that are nefarious, anomalous, or suspicious as a result of sort of using this workflow. So I'm excited to kind of showcase it for sure. But that is, one of the examples of one of our customers actually successfully using it and,
Mhm.
buying themselves a lot of time to look at and do things that are more important, but also sort of bubbling up these security events at the same time.
Mhm. I
Yeah, I mean,
I
and I
love
think
both
just to
sides.
like add on to that, I think this customer like we're talking like not just a little bit of an improvement, right? It was what they told us is like a 500% improvement in like mean time to detection.
Yep.
Right? These are not just
Wow.
we're not just sort of hypothetically saying like, oh, I bet you people could probably move faster with Tines plus Anvilogic, right? Like there is concrete data that there is significant improvement here.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I see it as, of course, a time saver, which is always something we could be using more of, right? In the analyst world, the precious time is incredibly precious. But also I also see it as an elimination of the the roadblocks that they get to do what they need to do. Like, and just imagine just how it feels to just really seamlessly go through their day to day. So that's also like a quality of life. But so Matt, follow up question for you. The impact that this has, right, can be different across the different types of personas that we talk to every day, right? From both the practitioner side, but also as a team and also like as a CISO like yourself. Can you talk about maybe the difference in impact across the different layers?
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking to security engineers and analysts, I think the quality of life improvement is really what we hear most from people because there's sort of like Maslow's reverse hierarchy of needs when it comes to like responding to alerts,
That's right.
doing threat hunts, thinking about detection, tuning, and improvement. And I think for a lot of folks, you sort of feel this obligation to like handle alerts first, and then whatever else you have time to do, you'll go do, right? And the reality is you just don't have time to go do those more important things that involve, human creativity and thought and sort of all the reasons we hired people as security professionals in the first place. And so once folks are able to, free up some of that time to go focus on the more, on the deeper, more important work, the benefits that security leaders get are not only more efficient teams, right, that are able to have more and more of an outsized impact without adding headcount, but they're also able to, sort of match a little bit more effectively the operational tempo that we see from attackers, right? And so ultimately, as CISOs are thinking about, risk and risk reduction and moving left and being more proactive about identifying adversaries, the benefits really result in these things like shortened dwell time, not for the wrong reasons, right? Faster time to detection, and the ability to be more efficient, with the same number of resources that you have. And finally, from like just a team and people perspective, nobody wants to be spending their day going through false positive alerts. It's the least possible effective use of their time. And so just from purely a human retention and job
Yeah.
satisfaction and like job long and institutional knowledge perspective, when you give people work that makes them happy, they are more likely to stick around,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of
Oh
advantages
yeah.
there for leaders as well.
You really hit that on the nose. I was going to say the same thing. Like, people don't want to be doing boring work, right? People
Right.
want to be doing exciting work and hard work and things that show value. And automating some of these processes and sort of helping out with the time saving in order to sort of allocate those resources to things that matter, I guess, a little bit or more a little bit more interesting to do, significantly will help your retention of people as well.
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
something we can always improve on is our retention. But I also love the slick phrase of operational tempo. What a slick little phrase for a
I like
slick
that.
little demo. Yeah. Are we ready to show what this could look like? What the integration could look like? I think
Yeah.
we've done a lot of trailer like leading up to what it is, what it feels like, but I think the audience is ready to actually see it in action, right? What better to see it than a demo?
Let's do it. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And I will go ahead and jump into Anvilogic first and just kind of go through an alert, right? Basically, an encoded PowerShell low fidelity alert. We'll talk about how we structure the data. And then we'll move over to Tines as we identify it to be something that is an event that we need to look at, and how we can respond faster to that throughout this whole process. So I am just in a demo instance within Anvilogic. I'm going to go ahead and look into one of my rules. So I'm just going to go into my detect and look at my threat identifiers, right? These are sort of those lower fidelity rules that are not being correlated. And I'm just going to jump into an encoded PowerShell command rule. So this encoded PowerShell command rule is just looking for encoded commands that are occurring across the environment. I'm actually going to jump into my specific rule here that is basically looking to showcase a detection framework, right? And within this detection framework, I'm gathering data, all right? I'm looking for my EDR data. As you can kind of see here, if I jump into here, what we're doing within these gather data sort of components is schematizing that data. All right, so we're making this data to look like normalized fields, right? And this is sort of what we bound our detections to be, right? Schematized data that is normalized, right? Taking unstructured data and making it structured. And following that, right, is our where clause looking for encoded PowerShell commands, right? So here we're looking for process path being PowerShell.exe. And then a regex for looking for encoded PowerShell command strings, enriching that data with all of this use case information, right? So we have EDR logs, we have some information up here indicating that this is tied to execution, command and scripting interpreters specific to PowerShell, and defensive agent obfuscation files or information, right? So this rule has a lot of thread examples and tagging components to it as well that will be sort of allocated into this rule as well, right? So when you receive an alert and talking about sort of structured data, we're also pulling in enrichment and context. That context can further help in the sort of triage analyzer component that we work with in Tines, and which I'll sort of showcase as we continue to go through this. Also, in our structure, there's an allow listing framework, right? There's always a need to tune this rule at some point in time. There are things that happen within the environment that are going to be benign. Making sure that there's an allow list within every rule is something that is critical for Anvilogic. Last but not least is the definition of actually what happened and where you're sending those events. In this case, we're sending it to Snowflake, and I'm just going to go ahead and click on test. Right, so right now I'm actually running this rule against data that's residing in Snowflake. Again, we are a sort of multi-data platform, so this can work across Splunk, it can work across Databricks, it can work across Azure, any flavor of sort of log analytics, Sentinel, and as well as ADX and Fabric. Now, I do have a rule that fired. It looks like it occurred at 6:17 at 9:34:43, right? And what you're going to see here is a list of schematized fields, right? And you'll see that they're all normalized fields, right? But also within this event, and I kind of scroll slower, you'll see that the data category is brought into it, details around this particular alert. So PowerShell is a powerful interactive operating tool. It's going to give you some information around threat groups that are leveraging that particular, sort of use case. And you can kind of continue down the line to see different results, the tactics and techniques, some reference information as to how you can learn more about this particular rule. All of this context and structured data is going to matter. And the reason that I'm showing that is because as we sort of funnel into Tines, right? And I'm just going to go into my playbook that is essentially looking to take alerts that actually have triggered, and send them through this workflow. Prior to going through this workflow, I'll kind of give you sort of an overview of actually what it does. Right. So in this instance, right, Anvilogic is sort of taking those alerts, right, and retrieving them from what we call the events of interest, right, which are where are your signals, sort of where your detections deployed. It could be multiple places. It also can be your preventative controls that you actually have, being sent into the same events of interest. It's just a glorified hunting index, right? What we're doing, right, is pulling in those alerts, identifying them. This is sort of making sure that we have, pagination, basically exploding the alert within our AVL analyzer, and continuing down the path, right? So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And what this will do is send this encoded PowerShell command alert, and right now go through the process. So as you kind of see in Matt, you're probably way more familiar with this than I am. You'll see that the sort of process is running, right? And through this process, you're sort of going through the process of taking that alert with all that context that has been shown within the alert itself, and running it through a AI event triage with Anvilogic Copilot. Now, I'm just gonna go here and just jump into this. You're gonna see this as a sub-story within Tines that essentially is taking that and sending it through our API triage analyzer, taking it, receiving an event ID, and basically running it through our Copilot sort of environment in order to triage the event and sort of tell you when the progress has been made, whether that's Copilot analysis in progress, the analysis has now completed, maybe there was an error in analyzing the event, maybe there's a timeout, so on and so forth, right? So now I'm just going to jump back into my main story here, and it's going to disseminate whether something is to be escalated, and whether it is to be benign, or whether it requires further review. Right, so that encoded PowerShell command, as you guys, security field here, is familiar with. Encoded PowerShell command happens a lot, right? I mean, there's some tools that actually naturally do it in order to mask some keys that they may be passing. It's just something that admins may be doing as well, right? So it's a noisy rule or low fidelity, right? And can cause alert fatigue. But if you kind of run through this process, right, you're able to sort of determine whether it is escalated, benign, or requires further review. I will basically go through, what an output of creating a case is, and sort of, highlight like what information actually gets sent back from the triage analyzer. But prior to doing that, I do want to also make sure that from a mean time to respond, I'm creating a case here. That does not necessarily mean you could take this playbook in Tines and basically rephrase it to do some isolation of a host. And Matt, maybe you have some ideas around if something is escalated, what have you seen customers do in terms of like, when something is identified to be escalated, some of the paths that they take?
Yeah, I mean, everything from automatically reaching out to the end user to, in an out of band way to ask them like, hey, what are you doing right now? Right. Like,
Yeah.
to your point, sometimes people are running legitimate commands, and just getting that end user input as context can be very helpful.
Yeah.
If you combine this with, the fact that maybe this is a machine that belongs to someone in a OU that shouldn't really be running PowerShell. Maybe you take the initial step of isolating their machine from the network just as a precaution, right? And they can get it unlocked after the NLS has had a chance to take a look at it.
Yep.
And so, yeah, there's a couple different ways that we see folks, use this sort of workflow, extend it, reach out to their threat intelligence tools and platforms to see if there's additional context. And I think the key here is that they can layer on as much or as little of their existing process as
Yep.
possible, right? Like this doesn't have to be a sea change in how you respond to these types of alerts.
Yeah, very key, and I think that's really crucial, right? Like what we do is we love to publish, stories in the Times marketplace, and obviously this is one of them. But I wouldn't say that like this is completely been something that has kind of picked up and dropped, right? People have existing processes around how they triage alerts. And we want to make sure that like, using with Times, we provide guidance around how to sort of leverage this functionality. However, to make sure that they're in an understanding, and Times does a great job at this, is how easily they can kind of integrate this into their current workflows. And with that, right, I think our sort of completion of this, workflow has been done. And what you're going to be able to see here is a case, right, for that encoded PowerShell command, right? And through this sort of information, you're going to be able to see a lot of different information, right? So a lot of this information comes directly from our triage analyzer. So in our summary, it was created at this point in time, and the determination was to be suspicious, right? So it'll kind of write a fully analyzed case for you in the leveraging a lot of our supported tools. All right, so our AI triage analyzer, to speak a little bit about what those supported tools are. If you think about of a triage analyst, right, what are you actually doing when you receive an alert? If it has a hash, you're going to VirusTotal. If it has an IP address, it's going to Shodan. If you have, need to understand a little bit more about the command itself, you're going to look to sort of leverage tools to identify that. In addition to that, some contextual information around enrichment that you may have it internally. All of that comes into play, right? Those are sort of standard operating procedures or run books that people use in order to kind of go through and disseminate whether something is malicious or benign. Same thing actually occurs here, right? So the AI is actually doing the same thing. It's running into VirusTotal, it's running into Whois and Shodan information. It's using Command Analyzer and LOLBAS to kind of determine what the command is actually doing and the fidelity of that particular command, and actually producing a summary of it, right? So in this sort of example, you'll kind of see that their alert message is basically going through here, and there's an encoded PowerShell command here that is listed. Basically, there's findings, no findings via NSLOOKUP. Local is a local domain, and they're going to look for hashes, right? In this hashes, you're going to see this events is very rare, 2 or fewer events of interest in your environment. Malware is often seen very few times on few hosts, so that increases the suspicion. Now, process, right? Looking into our process, our endpoint process analysis, labeled this process as common in an environment and therefore likely to be benign. However, using a look back of the last 7 days, there was 0 similar process that occurred. All right, so little sort of back and forth here, but as you can kind of continue to go down this analysis, the conclusion indicates that this is something that's nefarious, right? And the hash was ran through VirusTotal and identified to be known malware. So, the determination is created and sort of suspicious, and you can kind of see that it wrote out a lot of good detail as to what were the steps that it took in order to actually make this determination, right? And also you'll kind of see those additional fields. If I kind of go back into my alert, right, going back into searching that event, a lot of these fields here and sort of down identified in interesting fields on the left-hand side, you can find those in the case, right, right here as well. So, if you do find you want to further sort of elaborate on this particular rule or sort of further investigate, you still have that capability, right? All that event is, all the event details, structured data, contextualized data is sent to Tines so that you can make the response as fast as possible, without sort of having a human element in terms of going through the runbook steps, but rather a human element to review the runbook steps and sort of run through whatever response necessary or whatever playbooks that you may already have existed in Tines in order to sort of respond and sort of eradicate the situation. So I remember doing this as in JP Morgan Chase when I had a run book. I ran through the steps, and I would be able to get to maybe 6 cases a day if I was lucky. And that took a large team and a large scale team in order to go through some boring things sometimes, right? When it's an alert, but you have to go through the documentation as a part of procedure. That's not fun. But being able to do this and being able to do this a lot faster. I said 6 times. I could think if this could happen, 6 times in a minute. So think about all that time saved, and the ability to kind of use Tines in order to take the value from the structured data and structured event, run it through our sort of triage analyzer that supports a lot of the tools that you expect when you're triaging an alert and you're using as a human, and sort of running through this process and maybe even connecting it into some existing playbooks to respond to it faster.
Mm-hmm. Some follow-up questions that we commonly hear around SOAR and or playbooks or automation type of playbooks that maybe Matt, you can speak to is I really want to talk about just the ease of use, how easy it is to deploy playbooks. We often hear some objections in the field of like after you deploy maybe those first two, three playbooks, it's hard to build playbooks. Just it's hard to, a lot of them, you need kind of a lot of skill in Python, or you need a lot of dev work involved to even to just keep them maintained and up and running and all everything locked into place. So can we talk about just how easy it is to do it with Tines?
Yeah, I mean, what you're describing is absolutely true of legacy SOAR platforms. It's one of the reasons why our co-founders left their jobs as security practitioners to go build Tines, because it was
Wow.
like they were trying to do automation and just couldn't find anything on the market that let them automate the way they wanted to. And so what we see with Tines, is folks who have had experience with legacy SOAR platforms they literally go from maybe one or two runbooks that they've built out to
Mhm.
dozens in Tines within a couple months. And it's because we've really tried to take the approach of making Tines this. I like to joke we're a reverse onion of complexity. It is very simple right off the bat to start building with our no and low code UI. We have thousands of templates and examples available, including literally what the workflow that we just ran through here today is available in the Tines story library, right? You can just get
Mhm.
started with a single click. But if that doesn't fit your exact organization or your exact workflows, everything is customizable. And so we really try to give the best of both worlds, where you can start with something dead simple out of the box, and then make it work exactly how you want it to work for your organization. And we think that combination really helps accelerate teams' abilities to actually add automation the way they want to, right? And democratize it a little bit more in their organization rather than having it, limited to just a few specialists.
Hmm. I love that. I loved, Monty, I loved what you showed. This is the kind of structured clarity, right, that defenders have been begging for a long time. That got up and went to different companies to start build. Monty's team had a similar story when they came over to build Anvilogic, but in general, I mean, raw alerts are great. These point detections are great. I mean, imagine how much alerts your EDR is sending you. It's in the thousands, right?
Yeah.
But it's really what you do with them, how you correlate them, right? With context, with speed, right? And send them to an automation platform like this, which can do really anything in the world with it, right? If it has an API call available to be
Right.
called on. So I thank you for showing that. We're so over time, but I do want to end on a really great note here with you both, is really just how our listeners can get started with when building their detection and response pipeline. Uh, should they start with one versus the other? Maybe it's not going to be easy to take both projects on at once, right? What is your advice from both perspectives on how teams can get started with this?
I'll go. I mean, I'd say start small, right? I think, people find that their head is in the sand. There's too much going on, and there's sort of this ever so evolving wheel of, I can't improve because I can't keep up, right?
Yeah.
Spend that time, right? I would say, start small, start with a individual use case, right? That individual use case can then expand across and scale it, right? But I always find success with, saying, all right, I have a lot of false positives from my EDR vendor, just as an example, and that EDR vendor is driving a lot of low fidelity alerts, right? And a lot of time from my SOC, right? So how do we solve that problem, right? And go through the process of sort of building that detection framework, building that structure, right? And then sort of integrate it into a output in times and some sort of response that is non-impactful, right? Just to sort of see it, right? And see it and sort of grow upon it, right? I think that's a good opportunity for people to start, right? Is starting small, starting with a use case, starting with a phase, right? And continue to phase it out. And what you'll kind of see is, people will kind of grow and grow to like it because they're buying themselves valuable time back to actually do some of the more interesting things, some of the more impactful things to the business, rather than sort of continuously in this wheel of, problems that, are happening up and downstream in the effort to solve meantime, detect and respond, and maybe delaying that as a result.
Yeah, I think, transformation does not mean blowing everything up and starting over from scratch, right? And
Yeah.
honestly, one of the reasons why I wish I had Anvilogic when I was, building out security operations teams is because, you can add it on top of the data sources that, like exist in your organization, right? And like, you don't have to choose an all or nothing approach. And I think this is the philosophy that we've taken on the Tines side as well. You don't have to fully replace every single process that your team is operating today. You can start to iterate and build. And so, I would say for teams that are looking to get started thinking about detection and response specifically, you do need to know what's happening to be able to respond to it, right? So I
Sure.
would say, like, yeah, you should probably start with, making sure you have the high quality detections, and then start automating the responses that you take to those. But one thing I will note that as we talk to security teams, it turns out they have a lot of orchestration and automation needs outside of incident response that actually make them more able to focus on incidents. And so I think, overall, like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a chicken and egg thing. And teams can absolutely start thinking about these things in parallel, but I would absolutely just advise, start small. You're probably underestimating both the amount of manual institutional knowledge and arcane data sources, right? That'll maybe take a little bit of time to connect, right? You're always going to be perpetually improving here. But yeah, I think it's beautiful that you don't have to make this like binary choice between either this approach or what you have now. You can absolutely evolve to here.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that concludes the incredible segments that we've covered here. If we think about the vision forward, any slight previews or hints that you guys want to share about what's next for Anvilogic and Tines? Can we expect more workflows to come on your community?
I would say
Yeah.
most definitely. We're sort of constantly building a lot of different workflows with our API
Mhm.
capabilities. So outside of just the triage analyzer, right? What are some other
Mhm.
things that you could do, leveraging a lot of the context and data that you're collecting? Maybe it's tuning opportunities, right? And sort of
Right.
identifying ways to tune using workflows in that nature in order to sort of find what you closed an event as, and how you can funnel that back information into tuning your rules using automation. So a lot of things to come, I think, on our side in terms of working with this great partnership. Just one of the many playbooks that we've posted on the Times Marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, we're always curious as well for folks who are, using both solutions. Feel free to contribute, right? The Tines library is a community thing, and most honestly, a lot of what we see in there is contributed by folks who have figured out the best way to make Tines and Anvilogic work for them. So definitely eager to see what folks build. We're adding some interesting new AI capabilities as well in the near future.
Could a
Uh,
co-pilot be there in the near future? Funny how
I
Monty didn't even refer to our co-pilot as Monty co-pilot. He will
Ah,
never speak to it like that.
never.
yeah.
So a
um,
co-pilot in the near future for Tines?
I am under strict instructions to save the surprise.
Okay.
So keep an eye out. But yeah, I think there'll be some really interesting new ways to combine Anvilogic and Tines here in the near future.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're very eager for that. But overall, incredible session, y'all. Thank you so much for bringing your expertise, the stories, this real life, workflow that's available for download on the community, and obviously probably an inspo from our own customers, and your energy, your candor. So thank you so much. It was really felt during this conversation, and it's absolutely clear that when detection and response flows really nice together, has that operational tempo, teams can not only just move faster, but can just feel better, right? Feel more confident about the work that they do, and give their best, right, at the work that they do. So to everyone who joined us, we appreciate your time. If you want to learn more about the Anvilogic and Tines integration, you can scan this QR code. We put it all together in this website for you. So until then, you can keep hanging out with us bi-weekly on our Dispatch podcast. But until then, thank you so much for joining today, and have yourselves a wonderful rest of your day and summer.